Believe you can, and you're already halfway there. Today, we're talking about inspiration. D&D DMs. Do you ever reward your players with inspiration points die? If so, how and why? I've only given out maybe 3 inspiration points ever, and a player can only have 1 inspiration point at a time. I used to give extra roleplay XP. Now, since the group is higher level and it just confuses things, I may convert individual RPXP to group RPXP. All with the idea that the group dynamic allows for the role-playing. It's a little like masked tips, which I don't like, but it works better for flow. This video is sponsored by Saga of the Void Maiden, a Warhammer 40k actual play web series. Come immerse yourself in the 40k universe and follow a rogue trader's crew as they halt their expedition to descend onto a planet that should not be, to investigate a signal that demands their attention no matter the cost. Inspired not only by the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, but also by the equally grim and mind-bending SCP universe, the tension is palpable as this band of intrepid spacefarers try to uncover what went wrong in an abandoned inquisitorial outpost on a planet covered in steamy jungle, save for a single storm of ice and snow. Their unseen foe is everywhere and threatens them from the second they step off their lander and into the snow in this Forever DM custom adventure. A cold kind of purity. Now, I have to admit, in almost every 5th edition game I've played in or run, the players forget to use them, and then the GM forgets to hand them out. The whole system feels very tacked on. Similar systems in other games see a lot of use in my experience. Destiny, Pool, and SWRPG, Star Wars the role-playing game, and Passions, Obsessions, and Unknown Armies will get used by players way more. I think because the Destiny pool is a group resource, and it's dynamic, using a light side point gives the GM a dark side point. It's more front and center in the player consciousness, especially when the GM is front-loading the pain. When the GM has been burning through the dark side points, you start looking at the pool as a way to get out of the mess they put you in. Similarly, in Unknown Armies, your passions reset at the start of each session, so you don't feel like you're losing much by using them. Plus, they tie into your character concept in a way that gamifies the overarching themes of obsession and sacrifice. Now, inspiration points, on the other hand, you only get 1. Once you use it, it's gone until you impress the GM enough to earn another one. Then you have to declare in advance you're using it, so you might succeed anyway without it. I don't know. I just doesn't see a lot of use at my table. I like the other 2 concepts way more than inspiration points based on what you described it as, so good job. Yep, as a dungeon master in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, I hand out inspiration points fairly frequently if my group is creative and engaging. I always reward a player for adding fun and ingenuity to the adventure. I only hand out 1 inspiration point at a time, and typically only 1 per scene. An example of a scene would be a combat encounter or a group trip to the local merchant. If more than 1 player does something cool, I just hand out a single inspiration point to what I deem as the best contribution. It can be in combat or in general roleplay. I only allow a player to have 1 inspiration point on their character sheet at a time, but more than 1 player in the party can have inspiration. The whole part of giving inspiration is to reward player engagement and encourage them to do so again in the future. Getting to re-roll a d20 is a pretty powerful mechanic, so it's a valuable asset to a player in a time of need. I don't like my players to just sit at the table and let me talk. I like them to push the limits of D&D and contribute to the story through their engagement. The more active they are and the more their characters contribute, the better the adventure becomes. Happy adventuring! The problem I ran into early and often was that I was so in the moment that I would miss organic story opportunities to award inspiration. So, I have evolved to awarding it on crits. Any natural 20 gains inspiration. If they do something really outstanding, I will sometimes remember to give inspiration also, But in the main, a crit works great because the players remind each other as well. The other thing I do is allow them to assign that inspiration to others in the party. You aren't supposed to have more than one inspiration at a time, which I also enforce. But I still want to reward lucky breaks, especially since you can't really crit on skill checks or saves. So if the player that rolled already has inspiration, they can designate another PC to take it. Yep, I do give these points out to players. I give 1 point per inspiring instance. Each point is an extra D20 to be used as the player sees fit. What the players do are things that are either totally in character or something that progresses their character's storyline in a significant way. This is always subjective. That is because if I made a metric, the players would aim for gaining inspiration rather than just playing the game. I'll also award one if the players advocate for one to be awarded for something that they liked or that generally inspired them. Usually a witty one-liner, a well-timed clapback, or a well-played maneuver, or moments where a PC deals a well-executed gotcha moment on an NPC. I've also handed them out for appropriate 80s action movie quips. Oh, I'd have all the inspiration points for that one then. All inspiration points have to be used in the same session that they are granted. This way, we don't have anyone hoarding them. And players are actually encouraged to use them or lose them when they get them. I hope this helps. Good luck and happy gaming. I will hand inspiration points out for good RP, which also stands for role-playing if you didn't know, playing the PC's abilities and knowledge and not their IRL selves. My players quickly picked up on this since it's a fun encouragement for maintaining the immersion, while knowing that IPs may help at those most dire moments, like that last failed death save. If I'm too busy or sidetracked, I've had players ask, DM Sean, I thought it was awesome when, not the asking player's PC, Mira the Ranger did this great thing. Is that worthy of inspiration? Yes, having other players show some appreciation for good RP is worth it as well, so I'll grant Mira an IP if she doesn't already have one. Even if Mira already has an IP, this still encourages camaraderie and good RP around the table. I grant no more than one IP per PC at any given time, but most players will maintain one most of the time. If memory serves, the first time I ran across inspiration points was in Warhammer 40k, Rogue Trader. Or maybe it was Marvel Superheroes. It sounded like a great idea, so I used it wherever I could. Yes, these fate points, or hero points, or whatever, are nice for the character to have. A well-timed boost to a roll can mean the difference between life and death. Even better, though, is the way they can give the player some extra confidence. They may try a strategy they ordinarily wouldn't, since they have an extra cushion they can rely on. You can overdo it, of course. A character who's built up a dozen resets begins to think that they're bulletproof. They begin to become overconfident, and that affects their style of play in a not-so-good way. So I limit the number of resets to 3. If the character dies after using up 3 points of plot armor, oh, it was meant to be. How do the players earn these points? How do you balance those awards with extra experience points? Well, it's mainly a subjective thing. You know it when you see it. Extra XP, I suppose, is for learning something new, even if it was by making a mistake. An inspiration point is for something truly memorable, dare I say, inspiring, that makes you glad you played the game. Here's a recent example. During a diesel punk adventure, the party needed to get information from a ghost. They couldn't track down a medium right away, so one character chose to have himself killed, cross over to the other side, and find their source. It wasn't as risky as it sounds, a long story, but that took some moxie. Yeah, we need that story because that's really wild out there. Pathfinder 2nd Edition GM here. High five. There we go. Pathfinder 2nd Edition starts the player with a single hero point, which is analogous to inspiration, but not quite the same. I have developed my own twist on the system. I use hero point cards, which can be spent as a standard hero point or used for their unique ability. I hand 3 hero point cards to each player. Each player gives 1 to the players on their left and right, then returns the third card to the GM. Now this means each player starts with 2. Here are the benefits. It encourages teamwork and knowing each other's characters. It becomes a fun little metagame at the start of the session as players plan and think. Players absolutely love when a card they gave their friend makes a big impact. And by handing out physical cards, the players can remember that they actually have them. In Pathfinder Society play, where the cards are not allowed, I hand out little 3D printed holy symbols of Iomedae, Pathfinder's goddess of valor and justice. These little sword and starburst symbols serve as a physical marker of hero points, so they are rarely forgotten. Barely. I simply forgot about them when I am running a campaign, unlike the last story. Oh god, for all that I talk about trying to keep things simple and run things clean, and about being a lazy DM, I have things planned out multiple sessions in advance, multiple NPCs that have key info to give, and those that might not. Things for them to explore and do as sides to their adventure, and so on. It's all frameworks, so there's a lot of improv, and the rest of the typical behind-the-screen stuff. Tonight or next session, I am going to have to figure out how to have players shuffle a tarot deck and then stack the deck while they aren't looking, which will be to simply place the cards I want them to receive on top. If I fail, I fail. It's not a huge loss, but if I can pull it off, it'll be a nice panache of immersion. Awarding inspiration. It's just another thing on the list, and I'm too busy trying to run the game to think about it. Also, I'm pretty loosey-goosey on my skill rolls. I give options, sometimes I give advantage or disadvantage, but more often than not, I stack things in the player's favor. Inspiration's not a huge win when the player has a reasonable chance to beat it anyway. Now, if I were a hard ass on rolls and made skills a little more challenging, it might mean more. But then again, do you really want a brutal skill check? I've been DMing for 5 or 6 years now, and I've tried a number of different ways to reward my players for being creative, or for deep and impactful roleplay moments. I tried using the regular inspiration points that are the standard for D&D 5th edition, but while a reroll is nice, it's not always that useful. Not to mention the fact that I tend to forget to give them out. I really wanted to give my players something that could turn the tide of a battle that might not have been going their way, while not having to rely on me remembering to give it to them. So I looked at some other options. What I landed on is a system by DM Scotty called Luck Dice. I've modified certain parts of it slightly, but Luck Dice are a pool of D6s which a player can add to anything they roll, unless they roll a nat 1 on an attack. One of my modifications is that if a player rolls a nat 1 on an attack, they can opt to give up 2 luck dice to re-roll. Each player starts out with 3 luck dice at the beginning of a session, and they can add those to an attack roll, skill check, saving throw, or even their damage dice rolls. Players earn more luck dice if they fail a skill check, fail a saving throw, or roll a nat 1 on an attack. Each player can have up to 6 stored luck dice per session, and they reset at the start of the next session. Also, players don't have to predetermine how many luck dice they want to spend. For example, if they've rolled for an attack and the DM says that it doesn't hit, they can choose to roll 1 luck die at a time until they've rolled high enough in total to hit it with their attack. The idea with luck dice is that if a player is having a bad session and rolling low, they build up a pool of dice that they can then use to turn their luck around in an important situation or moment. It can really change the direction of a session for a player who's having a bad day. Now, this doesn't change the game that much, because instead of having to rely on having an inspiration point to spend in order to re-roll something, the player can simply choose to spend luck dice to increase their roll and pass whatever check they're trying to make. It just serves to give the player that much more power in a moment of need. So, how do I reward players for good roleplay now that I don't use inspiration points? I give them 2 special luck dice called impact dice. Even if they're already maxed out on luck dice, they still get the 2 extra impact dice, and the impact dice do not reset at the start of the next session. They remain until they are used. Also, because our table plays with the Pathfinder 2nd edition rule that rolling 10 over the target's AC counts as a crit, having enough luck dice to possibly push your attack from a hit to a crit can substantially affect a combat encounter, since luck dice can also be used for damage as well. Imagine one of my players having 4 stored luck dice and being 1 off from going 10 over the AC for an attack. They could spend a literal single luck dice to get a crit, and then add their remaining 3 luck dice to the damage, all rolled double because it's a crit. I've actually had a player roll a nat 20 and blow all 6 luck dice on the damage. That enemy had a really bad day. Hey everyone, Brian Von VA back at it again, checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know. DMs, have you ever rewarded players with inspiration points or dice or anything like that? If so, how and why? We love you all. Be safe, be happy. See you next time. Bye for now.